India's Prime Minister has warned Western countries against imposing restrictive climate change policies on the rest of the world as New Delhi prepares to host the G20. Narendra Modi also hit out at the failure of nations, including Britain and the United States, to meet a $100 billion a year spending pledge to help developing countries decarbonise. Modi's comments add to fears of a climate clash at this weekend's summit as India, China and Saudi Arabia face off against Western counterparts who are pushing for a 60% cut to greenhouse gas use by 2035. Rishi Sunak jets off to the country's capital tonight in a trip where he'll try to juggle his green agenda with the need to strike a post-Brexit trade deal with India. And that's exactly it, isn't it? We've got this situation where Rishi Sunak has got to deliver with this promise to provide post-Brexit deals. They've been slow in coming, and India is a big one. Now, they've been giving out some very interesting deals to Indian-backed entrepreneurs and companies here. We've also seen very significant changes in how people can come over here to work, to visit and all this sort of business with meeting families and all that sort of stuff, which has got to be part of it. But then also he's got to deal with the problems back at home. That here we are, we're talking about issues like, for example, overseas aid, and then you see India, which is making tremendous inroads into space and technology, and you're saying, well, hang on a second, why are you handing this money over to a country that is so advanced in so many different ways? So I think we've got to completely change the axis on which they're talking, and I actually have a lot of sympathy with those countries who say, stop lecturing to us about all this stuff, because frankly, you've done your advancement and you're there, and we're going through our advancement, and guess what? It's going to take us a long time. And by the way, India, I mean, the population is vast and huge. I mean, compared to us, tiny little population. And the wealth still has to be grown, and huge progress has to be made. So, look, I think Rishi Sunak has got a deal that could be done. We've got to treat people as equals, and we've got to stop talking down to people, assuming that they're going to listen to us. Rishi Sunak probably has the best chance of any prime minister of this nation to get a deal done because of his heritage and also his attitude.
Why are you agreeing with James so much? You're like nodding along with him. Are you feeling okay?
No, I'm not feeling good. Sorry, I was just encouraging him.
Okay,
listen,
I'm right on this, aren't I?
We're not agreeing here. Again, there's a lot to unpack. Exactly.
Lady and gentlemen.
Very nice.
The thing is,
unbelievable.
the thing is that the Global South have agreed this £100 billion deal to give. Sorry, the Global North have agreed this £100 billion deal to give to countries in the Global South to deal with the effects of climate change. They are the people that feel the effects of climate change first. That's 3 years overdue, so they've reneged on that. Without that deal going through, countries like India, China, and lots of African countries as well are not going to be able to meet their goals and thresholds on sustainability and climate change. Now, yes, India deserves the right to grow, but it also cannot continue polluting the climate in the way that it is. It's a balance that needs to...
It can.
Hang on, here's the dichotomy. India is a vast country. I've spent a lot of time in India. You also have enormous poverty and deprivation, and it's very much a developing country in some parts. But other parts, it's very much a first world country. It has nuclear weapons. It's launched a rocket into space to the moon. So then the question becomes whether India is really a developing country. Now, I'd argue, if I was the Prime Minister of India, I would also say, actually, we need to catch up. We need to have our electricity grid. We need to bring people out of poverty.
India is still very much a developing country. Putting a few rockets up in space.
No. But I was going to say, but as you know, the poor are very poor and the rich are very rich.
No, of course. And I'm very sceptical about this idea of handing over $100 billion to developing countries to try and move over to this sort of green energy, to move over to green energy. One, because I don't think the money will actually go towards that. I think we all know that it will be funneled into by corrupt politicians elsewhere. But the reality is we have to. You're right, James. We have to reorient the way that we look at how developing countries become more sort of green or environmentally friendly. Why do they use the burn fossil fuels to use as energy? Because it's cheap, reliable, and plentiful. And if we don't make renewable energy sources cheap, reliable, or cheaper, more reliable, and more plentiful, they're not going to make the transition. And that is the conversation we should be having. Because at the end of the day, you can say, oh, but it's polluting. Guess what? It's moving millions of my people out of poverty, and that's my priority, as it should be.
we're talking about 100 billion to the global south. How many billions have we given to Ukraine?
Yeah.
Finally, the West are no longer having all the power and influence. For too long, the Western world has been saying to the global south, what we say goes, you agree with us, you do what we say. And finally, thanks to the BRIC nations, thanks to the African nations, thanks to China and Russia as well, the world is shifting on the axis.
No,
and the West
you realise we agree. We agree on
No,
that. No, we do agree
no.
because I think I think these countries should act in their best interest.
So
Because
do
at
I.
the end of the day, I'm sorry, you can't have Rishi Sunak is not running India, Narendra Modi is. So he has to do what's
But I
best for
think
his
that's what we're all
population.
saying. And
Right.
that's the change that we have to have in our negotiations.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think at the end of the day, you have to then say, well, who enshrined all this nonsense of net zero and why impose it on those
Net zero
countries
is not
who
nonsense.
are
It's
much more
nonsense.
impoverished? But
Net
anyway,
zero is not nonsense.
and
It's
so I
nonsense.
think
It's not nonsense.
You all agree for
we're
once.
basically agreeing.
do.
Really not.
Right.